Perfect. So I'm going to share my screen now and then we can just um, get started. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes, I can
Yes,
see it.
yes.
Perfect. All right, so quick review of everything. I'm gonna just hide everyone. So again, if anyone has any questions or whatever, feel free to interrupt me as always. I'm gonna try to keep an eye on the chat, but if something comes up and I'm missing it, flag it for me, please. Um, But yeah, just a quick review of what we talked about last time. We talked about restructuring the task force and including more community into our meetings. We talked about different small wins, specifically snowbanks, which have all since melted, for better for worse. Written reports on any issues that we choose, as well as ice protections. We also talked about daylighting crosswalks and finding data of these intersections and just seeing if what's oh God, excuse me, what's available out there. We also spoke about civilian flaggers slash crossing guards and the Office of Neighborhood Services. So as I mentioned earlier, our agenda for the day is check-in, reminder, event community, flaggers slash, sorry, that should not say reg shirts. I'm making a lot of typos, so sorry about that. Crossing guards, intersection data, so just the data that I have found and that I think I shared with you all in the chat, as well as any other reminders, and then we're going to code. So the new structure of the task force, very exciting. Um, we are inviting community members. Now, there weren't any who signed up, but um, for this meeting, but I will keep a closer eye and continue to push it. So if you know anyone who is interested in just tagging along for our meetings and just sharing, and who's very invested in quality of life and community safety, please, 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 please feel free to share this form that's on the screen. I also share the slides with you all so you can click it and just see the form yourselves. But if there's anyone that you know that is interested in any of and working alongside us, please feel free to invite them. And what will happen is that after they fill out the form, I will email them and just reach out and just ask, yeah, like we just let them know what when the next meeting is, as well as share any materials that may be relevant to our conversations. So there's that. But as a reminder, so since you all are task force members, you have the ability to basically mute and unmute freely. But we're asking community members to sort of almost like still like participate, obviously, but maybe use the chat just so that we can respect the conversation that's happening amongst task force members. However, if we see that community members are very dedicated and very passionate about these issues, there's a chance to, and I don't like using this phrase because I feel like it's giving hierarchy, and I'm not really a fan of that, but like leveling up, so to speak, like becoming part of the task force, like officially. Um, so yeah, that's wanted to share that, wanted to highlight it because unfortunately we didn't get anyone to sign up last time, but we would love to have people this time. I mean, for our next meeting in April. All right. So next, the crossing guards slash civilian flaggers, sort of in Somerville. So these are city employees, they're not contracted or volunteers from the city. They're just their own employees and they're only for school years. So Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, but you saw them near a school zone, right? So it was more so crossing guards for a school versus just for a regular road.
Well, to be honest with you, I wasn't familiar with where the schools might be located, which was why I wasn't sure what was going on because it was right after the storm. The um, snowbanks were huge, and for a minute, for a little bit, I was in traffic at the time, and there were two locations along Winter Hill where people were on both sides of the street, and it's a three-lane, two-way on both sides. So I saw people on both sides, and I was just curious because they had vests on, they were bright, and I thought, well, maybe this was a safety thing for pedestrians in general because the snowbanks were so high, you couldn't really see if someone was coming out to cross the street. But I did call the police department, and they said that they are only out there in the mornings and the afternoons to coincide with school, and they it doesn't happen in the summer. So, and they are employees of the city. So I'm not sure at what level they are, but employees of some sort that the city sends out as a crossing guard, I guess. That's all the information I got.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, and thank you for sharing sort of off the cuff. Um,
Mm.
but so moving on to Boston, we do have, well, we used to have a civilian flaggers program, sort of, which, hi, counselor. So the civilian flaggers program, the flaggers worked with traffic and they worked construction and traffic detail, which is like, for example, if there's construction on the side of the road, then you see police officers just hanging around that site, just trying to manage traffic and make sure that no one is getting hurt or in the way of the construction. Um, that is that job would, so to speak, would be for civilians to take care of, not so much police officers. And it was created a while back as a way to really help out and employ people who are most vulnerable to incarceration, policing, and just systemic racism as a whole. So the way to really engage marginalized communities in this work while also giving them employment so that they can, you know, have a job and be able to, pay their bills and everything. So that's kind of like the big picture look at civilian flaggers. I also did want to highlight, because I know this was something that we sort of touched on really quickly in the last meeting, but red shirts. So red shirts are, it's like a program where I think this was under Menino that it was being done, but it was a group of residents of a specific neighborhoods, mostly teenagers who work to improve little things that like improve quality of life in their neighborhoods. So whether that be cleaning up like a sidewalk or making sure, just like general upkeep of a neighborhood, that's what they were in charge of, but it was residents from that same neighborhood. So that's what a red shirt is. And they're having a hearing on it in the city council on April 9th at 2 p.m. So just wanted to highlight that in case anyone was interested in it. And yeah. Any questions thus far?
I would also add from like a youth perspective, so they have reinstated community service hours for us. Um, so I think this is amazing like opportunity too if we could give like an incentive of just saying like, getting community service hours. And not only that, like just the mission of the project, but that small incentive would definitely help bring in like youth if they would like to do it from like all different ages as well.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. And Christina, Tina, you mentioned city year. Can you explain a little more what city year is?
To be honest with you, I'm not totally clear on what how that's designated, but I remember I've been in the city 40 years. I remember there used to be groups of young people that would be part of City Year, and whether it was associated with working at City Hall or just being part of the city network in order and going out into neighborhoods and helping do whatever was needed. But it was definitely a youth group, and I honestly don't have a lot of background on it, but they used to wear red shirts that said City Year, so I thought maybe the red shirt uh, thing was part of that, but maybe Julia knows.
Yeah, I believe she's still at an event. So
Oh,
I think that's why she might not be unmuting.
mm,
She might not be able to right now. But yeah, I'll look into it and I'll see if maybe they were involved with City or if it was just a coincidence that they both had red shirts.
mm,
Um, but yeah, thank you for highlighting that.
sure.
And I see that Chrisnell put in the chat. I think that's a great idea. I know so many people who are looking for community service opportunities. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was in high school, they had us do 100 hours of community service. When I was a senior, they had taken out the requirement that it needs to be 50 hours outside of the school and 50 hours inside of the school. Um, but it was 100 hours regardless. And so I know that that's something that um, a lot of like youth are looking forward to and just are willing to do. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that for you all. Yeah, any last comments before we move on?
I'm wondering, I see it says a hearing on red shirts April 9th.
Mhm.
Where is the hearing?
It's at City Hall, so it'll be in person. It'll be in person.
And in what room or, where
Yeah, it's
would that
the
be?
Ionella Chamber, so it's the fifth floor of City
Oh,
Hall.
okay.
Yeah, it's the city council space.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I can also put this in an email, so I'll make a note of that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
I was gonna note too that my understanding of City Year, I know someone who did work for City Year. I believe it's a nonprofit that partners with high schools, schools in general. I'm not sure what the grade level is as far as like a minimum grade. Um, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, and I saw that Dylan put in the chat that it's an AmeriCorps program. So how do I get this? So yeah, application. So yeah, definitely for high schoolers and oh, that's just their application. Yeah, so it helps you develop critical workforce and interpersonal skills and access exclusive scholarships through a year of service with City Year, helping them to achieve their goals. So yeah. Um, some background on that. Yeah, thank you all. So let me see if there's oh, perfect. So moving on, this is the part that if you like numbers, this is great for you. If math and just looking at a bunch of data isn't your thing, I apologize in advance. But I shared in the chat and I can reshare them for anyone who's entered since then, but we have the crash data and fatality data. Both of those I got from Vision Zero. Now, I do want to make a note because last meeting, I said that I thought that Vision Zero was associated with 311 data. That is not true. It's associated with 911 data. So it's a little more accurate in the sense that I know that a lot of you mentioned that 311 data might not be the most reliable because not everyone files those reports and all of that. And it really depends on the person and whether or not they feel comfortable or feel like their voice would be heard, or if they even know that 311 is a service that's available to them. So this sort of eliminates that because most of these crashes and fatalities, usually 911 is called by someone. So a little more reliable in that sense. I'm going to reshare all of that information again. Oh, Zoom is acting up on me today. Mm, Perfect. So I'm going to, oops, the crash data. This data, I uploaded it from the Vision Zero dashboard, but I also found a way to basically count the streets. So these are the ones in orange on the right side over here. These are the streets that were identified with the intersections that are the most dangerous that you all said that they were. And then a couple of others like Blue Hill Ave or Commonwealth Ave that I know are very busy or that I've seen in other places that people have said that it's dangerous. So I added those in and then sort of counted up how many incidents have been associated with that street or intersection. So I'm gonna just all right, so then we can just look at this one, and then the same thing is done with fatality. So it's the same sort of thing where it's just counting up that. It's just that the fatality one is thankfully a lot shorter than the crash data. But Columbia Road, actually, I should start out by saying after that, I also found a video of Peter Firth, which thank you so much, Dylan, for bringing him up in the last meeting. He's a professor at Northeastern who is a civil engineer, I believe, and has worked a lot with traffic safety, specifically around cyclist safety and mobility lanes, I believe. But he also does have a video. It's not a long video, it's 5 minutes. So you can click on this link if you want to see it. But where he basically goes through two intersections, it's Dorchester Ave and Columbia Road, and Jamaica Way and Viner Street, and just explains why these intersections are so dangerous. And so I've added his reasoning for both of these to be unsafe below here, but we can look, for example, Dorchester Ave and Columbia Road. That was also one that I believe it was Christina who mentioned it in the last meeting. We looked at the street a little more. And if you all want, I can also pull up the picture so that we can have in it like a bird's eye view of how it looks. But Columbia Road has a little over 1,500 crashes reported on it, and Dorchester Ave has 1,200. So this doesn't exactly mean that it was at that intersection that it happened. It's more so somewhere along each of these streets an accident happened. So it's not perfect data, but it's an idea of how this stuff happened. And then along with Peter's data, we also have Jamaica Way with 185 and then Biner Street with 64. Now, I'm not an expert on JP and Biner Street, but my assumption is that Biner Street gets a little busier because of Jamaica Way and people turning on to it. So I think it's fair to say that some of these numbers are associated with that intersection with Jamaica Way. All right. Anything that comes up when you're looking at this data, anything that really stands out, anything you want to comment on?
Some things I'm noticing is that maybe we could put more attention on the ones that are the highest impact. I kind of see one with the 3,000, and that's something that um looks like that we can maybe target, as well as maybe another street that I didn't really think about that there are accidents on, that we can get a number if we can on Adams Street and the side streets that are off of Adams. It's a bit hard for those cars to turn left or right coming from, say, Linden Street or not Leedsville, that's a one way, but just for reference, maybe we could focus on the highest impacts.
Yeah, I do agree there's a lot for Washington Street. I do want to say though that might also be because there are so many Washington Streets, so it's not the Washington Street in one neighborhood, it might include
Oh,
all of the Washington Streets.
multiple. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much a newbie when it comes to playing around with like spreadsheets and stuff. So basically this 3,200 number is just looking at every time it says Washington Street. So if we look at it, um, like this is Dorchester, Demick Street, and then you have North Washington Street, which I don't know why it's oh wait, North Washington Street is somewhere else. Okay. Yeah, so we do have a separation between North Washington Street, I believe that's in the North End, and then Washington Street everywhere else.
I would love to see data on Washington Street broken out for like around Nubian Station. Like that area is that you've got some confusing street layouts and the streets are way too wide and so people drive way too fast. And I have a feeling that that will be a hot spot.
Yeah, so for the next meeting, if it's helpful, I can break down, like if we decide one or two streets, especially like, for example, Washington Street, that might be a little more since it's probably in separate neighborhoods as well. I can definitely try to disaggregate the data a little more and try to focus, like narrow in on one or two areas. I think that's something that we would have to basically talk about together as a group to see what you all want to decide on. And then from there, I can disaggregate it a little more and just really get like laser focus on one area or two areas maybe. And I think it's also not that we should be I think we should be very cautious when looking at the crash data versus fatality data because it honestly depends on the magnitude of the crash or the accident for it to cause a fatality, but I think it's still worth looking at where the highest fatalities are because that might be an indicator of, well, this one might have not had as many crashes, but the crashes that there were pretty bad, or it's had a lot of like fatalities. Um, but also on the side, I do want to mention this here, column B. It lets you know what kind of accident it was. So for example, this first one on William Day Boulevard, that's South End. Um, there was a bike accident versus a motor vehicle accident at Morton and Lucerne or pedestrian at Clarendon.
Do you know whether they, so like if there's a collision between a bike and a car, how that would be classified?
That is a great question. I don't know, but I can figure that out. I can ask
Cool.
them and I can get back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, and about how many intersections do you think we'll get a chance to daylight?
That honestly depends on how big of a budget and how much it costs. I think we should focus. This is just my opinion. I think Counselor Mejia has a better idea of the budget, might be able to answer this a little more once she's able to unmute, but and when she's out of her meeting. But I think that it really does depend on how expensive the daylight ends up being and how much of a budget we can get. So I know that's not the
Cool.
answer that you were looking for, but I think it might be good to focus in on one or two to really workshop so that by the time that we're asking for a budget, we have an idea of
Yeah.
what the needs of those intersections are.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Um,
Um, Something I noticed was that I feel like this is pretty obvious because Blue Hill Ave is like an insane like I'm learning how to drive and every single time I have to drive in that area I get so much anxiety because of how crazy and confusing it is. And I'm just like interested, is this like all of Blue Hill Ave? Like, because I know you said for Washington Street, it's like all of them kind of combined. Is it that the same for Blue Hill? Because I see it has 2,000 crashes. So I was just wondering.
yeah, unless there's multiple, like Washington Street I mentioned because Washington Street, like the one closest to my house, I live in Rosendale, expands through three neighborhoods, but I know that there's Washington streets all over the city. And so they might have the same name, but being completely separate neighborhoods or not even be touching. So that's the issue with Washington Street. With Blue Hill specifically, to my knowledge, there isn't another Blue Hill Ave in the city other than like the one that you're referencing. So I think that one relates to only the Blue Hill Ave that goes through like Dorchester and Mattapan and just like across the city. However, the data, like unless there's another street with the same exact name, it should be it. The only exception is the Jamaica Way one. There's Jamaica Way and then there's Jamaica Way No, I think it is. Let me see. Mm. Okay, well, there was one. Let me see. Mm. Yes, so Jamaica Way, no. I don't know why it says no here, but for example, this is still Jamaica Way and Binary Street. So it's like it's still the intersection, but I don't know why it said no there, which is why I added it part of the. I'm just going to use this.
It's probably because most of the other street names have two fields. So there's like Washington and Street. Jamaica
Mm.
Way is just Jamaica Way, and there's the second field is blank.
That's a good point. Thank you. So yeah, that's probably why I just combined those two because I did see that some of them just said Jamaica Way. So I combined them because I know that it's the same street. But yeah, all the other ones should be referring to one place unless there's multiple of those streets across the city. I hope that answers your question, Chris, now.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Of course. Any other observations or questions on the crash data before we move to fatality data? And just as an FYI, it is like 40,000. Yeah, there's 40,558 um data. What is that? In like individual crashes that are part of this data set.
I have a question.
Mhm.
This is Tina.
Hi.
So the goal, I'm just trying to be clear on the goal here right now, is to identify a handful of the worst intersections, and does it have to do with just pedestrian interaction, or obviously the vehicles are a problem for pedestrians, but I guess the data we're looking for is to find out where the pedestrians have the biggest problem or where the cars are crashing into each other. I
I
guess
think the idea is to reduce the amount of damage to humans in general,
right.
and that will mean probably paying more attention to crashes that involve a pedestrian, because if there's a pedestrian and a vehicle, then odds are the pedestrian was injured.
Right. So in there, obviously we can see it's in some down the left-hand side, it's showing where pedestrians were involved with problem areas. So I'm guessing that's probably the best place to focus and find the most active intersections that are coming up for that.
I think it depends on whether if there is a car hitting a pedestrian, whether they register it as being a pedestrian or a car crash,
Right. Right.
and we don't know that yet.
And where would that information be, I wonder?
Yeah, so I can share the map. Um, where it is. Okay. This is the crash data map. This is where I got all the information from and I got the data. But Dylan did like you were spot on, Dylan. I don't know how they would classify if it's between two different modes of transportation. If it was just a pedestrian in a car or a bike in a car. I'm not entirely sure, so I will reach out to them and ask for a little more in-depth in the data, and I can try to get you all that information before our next meeting so you can take a preview, like a little look at it before we come together again. I do apologize for not having that data beforehand, but thank you all for your input, and I will definitely look into it afterwards. And if it's helpful, once I know that, I can do like this same count thing for just pedestrian accidents.
Awesome.
Yeah, so if that, yeah, I can definitely do that. I'll look into that, see how they um identify that kind of crash and then do the counting. And I can share that before our next meeting.
Awesome. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And then I think in terms of, sorry, were you going to ask another question?
I was just curious. I know at one
Mhm.
point there was talk about putting speed humps, speed bumps around the city, and whether that would, if they're focusing on areas where there's a lot of incidents, and whether that would help mitigate some of the problems as far, and also the daylighting that might be. I mean, it seems to be a combination, the daylight um, crosswalks and speed humps to slow people down in certain areas. I don't
That
know.
and narrowing the road is generally the best way to slow people down.
Hmm.
And the humps work well too.
Right. I don't know how far they've gotten with that program, and how far, how widespread it is, and if there's data on what if that's helping.
Well, reporting in the Globe has suggested that the mayor has stepped in to slow the installation of the speed humps.
Hmm.
So it would be good to know.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I could definitely look into how I'm gonna jot this down. So how far into the program they are with adding speed humps and what the status is of it. So if they continue doing that, if they've slowed down on it. Um, I'll look for that. It is worth noting that I know that another member mentioned this to me on the phone, but the speed bumps that were being added in their neighborhood, I believe it was Chinatown, was it wasn't like the speed humps that were added, they were so small that cars would still speed through them. So just looking into the speed bumps that are being put in, how big are they and are they actually effective? Are they big enough that we're
Hmm.
slowing cars down, or are cars just ignoring it and keep on going, you know? So that's
Right.
something else to think about in this process, just how effective, how like what's the return on investment in those things basically. And then, Tina, were you going to add something?
No, no.
Hmm. Right. So then I think we can move on to the fatality data because this is a little more relevant to the pedestrian harm being done. Now, this includes both pedestrian, bike, and then motor vehicle accidents and just the fatalities that have happened there. The data set is much smaller, thankfully. Um, but we do see that there are a lot of accidents um, happening in a lot of these streets, specifically Washington and Mass Ave are the two biggest ones. Now, again, with Washington Street, it might be Washington Street in a bunch of different areas of the city. So I can also try to get more information. And if you want to play around with the data set, feel free because they do have the coordinates here. Not that that's helpful at all, because I don't know what any of these numbers mean just by looking at them. But if that's something that's interesting to you, definitely feel free to look into it. Like just look at that part. But yeah, we see Washington Street and Mass Ave have the biggest number of fatalities. Then we have Melnia Cass, Blue Hill Ave also has a pretty high number. Um, Commonwealth, Beacon, Dartmouth, Tremont, Dorchester, and Columbia. So just looking at this data set, is there anything that stands out or that's like something that you want to note for the group?
Just that it looks like these are definitely not evenly distributed through the neighborhoods. I see a real concentration just offhand in it looks pretty near me, South Endy, Union
Yeah.
Square.
Yeah, definitely. I think even the ones the that are in less of a residential area are still, one fatality is too many, but they're significantly less than areas like Blue Hill Ave, which is very heavy on like it's a very residential area. And also what is it? It's yeah, never mind, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, there's a lot of yeah. And I feel like that's expected too because of in a residential area, you have more people walking and out on the street, but at the same time, not all of this
Hi,
data
Kiara.
is, hi, counselor.
Did you mute me by mistake? I'm so sorry. I'm cheating on y'all. I'm at an event, but I told Kiara to hold it down while I was here. And I think she is doing an amazing job because she's still talking and y'all are still here. That means that she's holding you hostage or keeping you engaged. Which one is it, y'all?
Keeping us engaged and
Engaged.
informed.
Keep it okay. Thumbs up if she's doing a good job. At least show your thumbs up so I know that y'all are actually listening. All right, good job. I know y'all not acting like you're in the Zoom. You really are there. All right. Okay, good. All right, so I'm leaving you in capable hands, okay? I'm gonna come back when I go into my car, but I'm listening, just so you know I've been listening, okay? All right. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
counselor. All right. So anything else that anyone wants to comment on before we move on to the next part? You can also feel free to use the chat if you'd like. All right. So moving on to our next piece. Now with all of this data, how are there any intersections that you all feel like you want to um, focus on a little more? And I know that we have a pretty small group here today, but I do want to make sure that this work is going forward. And so we don't have to make final decisions in this meeting. Maybe if you want to wait till next meeting where we can hopefully have more people. But if we can really start thinking about one or two intersections that we want to focus on more, that might help us. I'll get the data for all of the intersections, just like I said I would. But if you want to focus on a specific one, then I can try to look into that one and get like just put like basically a one slide with just more information on that one intersection so we can start thinking about ways that we can improve it.
Well, I know that the data are really solid behind the two that Peter Firth identified. So I would definitely put those on a short list.
Yeah, and just for everyone, that's the Dorchester Ave and Columbia Road, as well as Jamaica Way and Biner Street.
And I just another question. Is the goal to identify the worst intersections, get the data, and then present this to the city for their help in correcting the situation?
Yeah, sort of. So this is the way that I'm thinking about it. And again, if this is something that you all don't really want to do, want to take it in a different direction, please feel free to because you all are leading this, I'm supporting. But what I had in mind is that over our next few meetings, we would identify these problem intersections that we're going to focus on and try to improve so that then we can get the funding for it. So once we identify them, we kind of have working sessions together where we look more in depth and try to map out what a daylighted intersection would look like and how we would go about it. Like, would we use flex poles versus zebra bumps? What would we add a crosswalk? Would we add art installations? What would we do? And sort of create I forget what they're like a blueprint almost of what this improved crosswalk slash intersection would be like. Then from there, we would, with Councilor Mejia's help, because she knows more about the city processes, but basically looking at, okay, sorry, there was a blender going on, and I was like, I don't know if y'all can hear me. But after that, then we would go to city, or maybe it'd be a specific hearing on these intersections and just looking at them a little more in depth, then getting a budget for it. Now, depending on how fast we can get this done, and like how fast we can decide on these intersections and workshop them, we maybe, and this is a big maybe, get funding for this fiscal year. If not, this might have to be a budget ask for next year, or maybe we can find money in one of the departments, maybe Public Works or like transportation or whatever the case might be, to get these like basically pilot out a daylighted crosswalk. So that's my plan. That's kind of how I was thinking about structuring the next few like meetings. However, if you all want to take it in a different direction, again, please feel free to let me know. And I hope that answers your question, Tina.
Yes, it does. And again, I guess it's helpful to narrow down one or two intersections, obviously, because it's going to be a big ask, I think, for the city to do any of those improvements. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure how it's decided. Is it decided by data? Um, because we're all in different corners of the city. There aren't any real problematic intersections to the extent that they hear or see the data here in the North End. So I'm guessing it's going to be in some larger neighborhoods in the city that would need the help.
Yeah, so definitely we want to take a data-centered approach just because it's a little more equitable in that way, in the sense that we're helping out the intersections that have the most trouble first, and then eventually we'll get to all of the intersections because we do want to make sure that if we go into a problematic intersection and we daylight it and it's like the safety has definitely gotten better, then we know that it's working really well. And then we can move on to all the other intersections that are also problematic, and then that'll expand throughout the city. Um, but yeah. Does anyone want to maybe throw out an intersection or two that they think we should also be focusing on? I know Dylan said Jamaica Way and Binary and Dorchester Ave and Columbia Road. Those were the two that Peter Firth had mentioned as being the worst intersections in Boston. But are there any others that any other members want to highlight on, or are we leaning towards those two?
Kiara, can you remind me which two we are focused on? I know we were talking about Washington Street and having different Washington streets. So if you could just refresh our memory to make sure we're focused.
Yeah, of course. So in our last meeting, I can pull out the slides so you all can look at it too. But in our last meeting, I kind of put together all of the intersections that you all mentioned were bad intersections in your neighborhoods. And so I put them all on the slide so you all could look at them and just see the intersections at each other's neighborhoods. Today, I got the data like from the Vision Zero database, and you all saw that data, and you it had like the street names for all of the ones that you all mentioned and that were in the slides, as well as some other bigger streets that I know have been having issues that weren't included in the ones that you all have mentioned in the past. Um, in terms of the Washington Street, I didn't mention a specific Washington Street. I think it was something that someone else had mentioned, one of them. I can look through. Oh, okay. I can look through that, but yeah, I mentioned also sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained. I mentioned that Dylan had said that they thought that the intersections pointed out by Peter Firth in the video that's linked on today's slideshow was one of the ones that they wanted to focus on or thought that should be towards the top of the list because he's done research in that area. However, I think only the Dorchester Ave and Columbia Road, I think that's the one that you brought up last meeting. The Jamaica Way and Biner Street haven't been brought up in past meetings. It was just identified by Peter as being one of the bad ones, like bad intersections. But I wanted to see if there's anyone else who wanted to like that thought that an intersection was really problematic and wanted to discuss it now as one of the ones that we can focus on moving forward. I know that was a lot of words, but yeah, just this time is sort of to choose an intersection or two that we can really focus on, or at least that we want to start focusing on, even if that doesn't end up being one of the ones that we focus on in the future.
I am definitely wanting to do more homework if possible. And so I'm hoping that we can finalize our list next meeting.
Yeah, okay. That's yeah, no, um we can definitely do that. And so I will, to reiterate, I will get the data. I will make sure to ask how it's being coded in that data set if it's between like two modes of transportation, so pedestrian versus motor vehicle or bike versus motor vehicle or bike versus pedestrian. So I'll make sure to ask how that's being coded so that we can have that information. Then separate data by pedestrians and then do the same counting that I did on the side. So I'll do that with pedestrian only data for the crash data and then look into how far adding speed bumps and that whole program, like where they're at and what they're going to be doing. So that's my homework. Um, but yeah, is there any other data that you all would want to see? Right. And see in the chat. All right. Now to close it off, that's the wrong slideshow. And then, okay. So our next meeting is April 16th at 6:30 and May 21st at 6:30. So I'm trying to get in the habit of letting you know like 2 meetings in advance so that you can start planning ahead for it. So I hope that's helpful. But April 16th, put on your calendars as well as May 21st. I believe I added you the calendar invite that went out today. It's a repeating one. So I believe if you look in your calendar on April 16th or the May 21st, it'll still be there and it'll be a reoccurring event. So just want to let you all know that. And then again, as always, the research document as well as the task force folder. The task force folder is up to date. However, the research document, I'll be adding in some more stuff and anything else that I find into that. And then the problem intersections. This doesn't include the ones that we talked about today, but it does include the ones that we talked about in the past. So if you do want to get a bit of a refresher and just more pictures on it, that one isn't like you can look at that. However, I would say that if you are looking at the problem intersections document, you might as well look at last meeting slideshow because it might have a little more information on it. Yeah, thank you so much for coming, Tina. Yeah. Yeah, first day of spring is Saturday. That is amazing. I'm so happy and so excited. Um, but yeah, so last part of our meeting is any final questions? That sounded like a statement. I meant it as a question. Any final questions before we do our closing? All right, perfect. So then I will start just one word to end as always, unless someone else wants to go. And I saw at least that you unmuted. Do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for putting this presentation together.
Yeah, of course. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy Thursday evenings to be here. All right. Does anyone want to start with their one word closing?
I could start, and my one word would be informed. And again, thank you for this presentation and taking time out of your day for putting this all together and to inform us.
Of course.
I can jump in next and just say eager. I agree. I think it's really helpful to look at the data, and I'm eager to get started somewhere. I think any start is a meaningful start. So really excited that we got that much closer today.
I will go next. I will say commitment to stay focused on the group, try to read more of the materials, try to get more involved in that.
I'll say energized. I am really looking forward to diving into data and coming up with a list.
My word is intentional. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that.
I would say curious. I feel like I learned a lot. I never really thought about how the way streets are set up could be leading to more accidents. So seeing all the data was really interesting for me.
Yeah, and I'm also feeling energized. Not just because I'm realizing every day more that I'm kind of a number, I like number crunching. So I'm kind of a nerd in that sense. But yeah, I am very energized to see what the data shows and then what will come out of it. And then counselor, I saw that you showed you put your camera on for a second. Is there anything that you would like to add before we close? I think she might have been called on during the meeting. Um, but yeah, if there's nothing else that you all want to talk about really quickly or any other questions or comments, that's it from us. So thank you all so much for being here again, and I will see you all April 16th.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Of course.